After all that has been said so far, on the face of it, this question seems odd. To question whether or not Fletcher's situation ethics is compatible with Christianity is still an important consideration, though. Remember, not all Christians think alike, so as some will love the idea of such an ethic, others will utterly reject it. You must be able to consider why this might be the case. In favour of situation ethics being compatible with Christianity is the fact that Jesus set an example that seems to be in keeping with Fletcher's descriptive principles. When he healed on the Sabbath, or harvested grain on the Sabbath, he was directly challenging the legalism of the Pharisees and taking a relativistic approach. He mixed with members of society that were considered to be undesirable, like tax collectors and prostitutes, regardless of what others said. His inflammatory statements clearly set out to attack legalism and adopted a more personal approach to faith and ethics, offering forgiveness for sin. Jesus' teaching was in keeping with this idea too. In his parables, such as the Good Samaritan, and his condemnation of the rich man in the parable who let Lazarus starve to death at his gates, he clearly takes the agapeic route of compassion for those who are in need. In his Sermon on the Mount he teaches not to judge others for their sins and to love enemies. These are clearly compatible with the 6 fundamental propositions which advocate that agape is not the same as liking someone, and that we must be prepared to break rules that do not serve love. Here Jesus seems to be advocating the relativist approach to ethics rather than the legalist. In addition, St. Paul clearly teaches that love is vital. As we've seen in 1 Corinthians, love is spoken of, but also in Galatians 5:14, where he reiterates Jesus' words that you should love your neighbour as yourself, and this is the whole of the law. Having said all of this, though, situation ethics seems to reject the commands in Scripture that seem to be absolute. The 10 Commandments are a good example, since it's always been taken that these are not to be broken. Indeed, even Jesus himself in the Sermon on the Mount gives commands that sound absolute by forbidding divorce, forbidding remarriage, and forbidding even looking at another person with lust. These rules appear to be absolute, and since they are directly and divinely inspired, it seems wrong to set them aside when it suits us. In addition, the Church has a structure of authority. Within this structure there is tradition and interpretation of Scripture which has been prayerfully considered over hundreds of years. Who are we to set this aside? It is arrogant and lazy to think that we can just ignore the work of the thousands of faithful and intelligent minds who have put together such structure of law for the benefit of humankind, just because it suits us to do so. The Roman Catholic Church in the past have spoken out against situation ethics. In 2005, the Pope said that we are moving towards a dictatorship of relativism, which does not recognise anything for certain, and which has as its highest goal one's own ego and one's own desires. In fact, when St. Paul wrote about love, he also wrote about other virtues or qualities too. Love may be significant, certainly, but it is not the only important quality, as Fletcher claimed. He felt that faith and hope were also vital, as were joy, peace, and so on. These qualities should surely also be considered when weighing up a moral decision. A one-principle ethical theory may be too narrow to be trustworthy. This theory may also not be compatible with Christianity because it puts human reason and conscience above the role of God. It is arrogant, since it seems to suggest that we should be allowed to do whatever we want regardless of what God has commanded. This is not the way of Christianity, which sees God as the highest authority. This is especially significant since Christianity teaches that we were subject to the fall at the beginning of humanity, and as a result we are sinful and tend to be egoistic and selfish. Since this is the case, it follows that our reasoning is not to be trusted completely. We should then look to the authority of God within Scripture rather than trusting our own fragile minds.